the explanation of psychology given by Sri Ramanujacharya. He was the great founderacharya of one of the four main sampradayas of Vaishnavism in India. This is the Sri Sampradaya or Lakshmi Sampradaya. And so Srila Prabhupada says in many places in his books that the truths that are established in that Sampradaya, we in this Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya also accept. So obviously, the foundation of the psychology of devotional service will be bhakti, which is the mood of pure devotion. And bhakti yoga is the cultivation of this mood. So from a psychological point of view, bhakti yoga is a certain kind of cultivation of the emotions. Our emotions form the, you could say, the glue of our attachments. Whatever we're attached to in this world, our emotions are very much involved with. So we saw before that liberation or bondage is determined by the quality of our attachment. So the purpose of Bhakti Yoga is to transfer our attachment from this material world to Krishna. And again, that particularly means a specific cultivation of our emotions. Now, Ramanujacharya, as does modern psychology, and we find this also in Srila Prabhupada's books in so many places. So, Ramanujacharya says the mind has three features. When we read Srila Prabhupada's books, we again and again find him saying that the psychological functions of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. So we can convert that into fancy modern psychological terminology. Thinking, feature of the mind, they will call the cognitive state. The feeling feature of the mind they call the affective state. Just like we have this word affection. Affection, when we're attracted to someone, we like someone, and we say we have affection for that person. So the feeling state, or this actually means the emotional feature of the mind. This is called the affective mind. And then the willing feature of the mind is called conative, yes. Conation refers to acting with the senses. So when the mind wills something to happen, then naturally the senses have to go into action. So these three features are there. Now, Ramanujacharya, he explains that of these three, the affective feature of the mind is paramount. The other two, cognitive or thinking and willing, they're subordinate to the emotions. And this is indeed what we can see in real life. I have done a lot of reading into philosophy. So philosophers are supposed to be very cognitive people. They're supposed to be always situated in reason, thinking in a very rarefied way, dispassionate, detached from the emotions. This is how people think of philosophers, but actually Philosophers as people are not really like that at all. If you read about, particularly the Western philosophers, like Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, he was an extremely emotional person. Negative emotions, very frustrated person. So much so that the last 10 years of his life he was mad and he couldn't even speak. And there was his predecessor, there was a certain line of German philosophers. So before Nietzsche there was one Schopenhauer. And he kept a diary. So in his rooming house there was one woman. Apparently, anyway, from his point of view, this woman, his neighbor, she was a very big annoyance to him for some reason or other. He didn't like her at all. So one day he became so infuriated with her, they had some confrontation on the steps. So he pushed her down the stairs. And she was injured and she couldn't walk after that. And so the court decided that he had to pay some upkeep, some regular monthly or whatever it was amount so that she could take care of herself because she couldn't walk after that. And then sometime after that she died. So he was keeping this diary, and his diary is, it's published. People can read it nowadays. So on the day she died, he noted in his diary something like "the bitch is dead" or something like that. Something really nasty and caustic. And he's supposed to be a great philosopher. So we can see these so-called, very reasonable, deep-thinking people. They're also ruled by their emotions. So this is the fact that so Ramanujacharya, he recognizes this and he incorporates it in his system of devotional psychology. So now we want to speak at this point, having introduced these three features of the mind, a very significant difference between the Vaishnava approach to the mind and the Mayavadi approach to the mind. Mayavadi means Shakracharya. So, according to the Mayavadi or personalist point of view, because they say that everything we perceive is strictly illusion, through and through, there is no substance to anything we perceive in this world. Because the background of everything is impersonal, is devoid of form or quality or activity, desire or anything. So that means everything we're experiencing now, according to Mayavadi philosophy, is you can't even imagine it actually, how it can be. Because our practical, of course we can understand what an illusion is from our present experience. But an illusion is a confusion, you see. Illusion means you're confusing something for something else. Like a common example would be counterfeit money, false money. So someone prints up some money in his basement with a laser printer or something. Prints up a few thousand euros. And he goes around to shops and buys things, spending this false money. So he's putting the people he gives the money to into illusion. But he's able to do that because there is real money. There are real euros. And they are confusing the false money for the real. So this is how we can understand that something is an illusion. Because there's a reality to compare it to. But in Mayavadi philosophy, ultimately, there is no reality to compare this world illusion with. So it becomes, this is the great paradox, and the impersonalists, this is what they like. They like things ending in paradox, where the mind just stops and can't work anymore. And they say, yes, that's it. I was telling you about the Buddhists who say, who meditate on problems like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? These are deliberately paradoxical, you see. So they just try to stymie the mind, bewilder the mind so much that it can't work anymore, and then they think that is the doorway to liberation, when the mind is not working properly. So Ramanujacharya, he very vehemently disagrees with this. And this is why yesterday's seminar was so important, because we were explaining how the Lord himself expands into these Purusha avatars, Mahavishnu, Garbhadaksha Vishnu, Shudaksha Vishnu. And with each expansion there is another stage of creation that unfolds. So the Lord himself is the basis of this creation. So therefore this creation, although it is temporary, it is still real. Because, like the Vedas say, Sa-akshita, because the Lord is viewing this creation. Actually, he starts the creation by his glance. He glances over the material nature, and by his glance he impregnates all the jivas into matter. And that's how the whole thing starts. So because he is viewing this material creation, maintenance and destruction of this world, therefore it has existence. It is temporary, yes, it is temporal. So when you compare it to the eternal spiritual world, then it certainly does not have as much substance. But nonetheless, it does exist, because the Lord is viewing it as existing. So Ramanuja says that the Lord is the great and the original. He uses three terms. Gyata means knower, Bhokta means experiencer, and Karta, doer. So these are the three phases of the mind that we've just explained. Thinking, Gyata, Bhokta, experiencing or feeling, and Karta, doing or willing. And there's a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Mrs. Klein, who must have written him a letter with some questions. This letter is dated in 1969. And Srila Prabhupada is stating there that our thinking, feeling, and willing has substance because we are, each of us in our psychology, samples of the supreme psychology of God. Krishna is the supreme thinker, feeler, and willer. And so we, in a tiny way, a very small way, are sharing in the Lord's psychological functions. So Srila Prabhupada makes this point, Ramanujacharya makes this point. So now let us look at these different functions of the mind, as Ramanujacharya explains them, and see how they're engaged in Bhakti Yoga. So we'll start with the cognitive or thinking function. So this basically means Anubhava, which means observation, and Smriti, which means remembrance. So then observation, Anubhava, is then subdivided. That we can observe things by pratyaksha. That means direct perception through our senses. This word pratyaksha, prati-aksha. So aksha means the eye seeing. And often in language, even in our Western languages, we use the term see in a general way. We don't actually just mean that we see with the eyes, but we perceive something, we understand something. Something is clear to us. So, in this way we perceive or see through all of our senses, and this is called pratyaksha. And then there's anumana. Anumana means by seeing through the mind, by tarka, by logic. So just for example, just a simple example. If I'm in my room, in my apartment, and I hear a knock at the door, and I call, who is there? And then someone says, it's me. Doesn't give a name, but just says, it's me. I recognize the voice. The voice is my good friend. So I'm not seeing him with my eyes. I'm just hearing the voice through the door. But in my mind, in English we say, in the mind's eye, which is a very nice expression. So in the mind's eye, I know that this is my friend at the door. Now, that's not completely certain. It could be a burglar, a robber or something who has a tape recording of my friend's voice. And he's holding the tape recorder up to the door and playing it. So there's possibility of illusion that way. But anyway, this is also a process of observation. And in science, this type of cognitive observation through the mind plays a very big role. In science, it's not just what they see with the senses, because in the really cutting-edge sciences, there's a lot of things that they can't see with the senses, like an electron. I'm sure everyone has learned about electrons in science class in high school. And they told you all about electrons and how they move about. But the fact is that no one has ever seen an electron. What they've seen is little streaks in cloud chamber experiments. And then they call the thing that makes the streak an electron. And they have an idea of what it is. But no one has ever seen it. You know, an electron could really be a very tiny little green dragon with wings. No one has ever seen it. But they, you know, they tell you electron, this blah blah blah, fill up one lick, and they've never seen it. So this is this tarka. This is seeing through logic. And people accept that too. You see, no one questions electrons. Because it makes sense. So this is also a type of observation. So pratyaksha, direct perception, and anuman, the use of the mind, logically, these are two types of cognition or thinking. We use these in our thinking processes. Then Ramanujacharya says there's a higher type of perception, which he calls divya pratyaksha, which is translated as intuition. So we all know what intuition is. It's a little hard to explain it. It's just something that you know. You have a feeling about something or someone, and you can't really always say why. It's just a sense. And of course, in our baffled present state, impure state, our intuition can be wrong. But Ramanujacharya says that the intuition can be purified. I'll quote here, this is a quotation from Ramanujacharya. One can achieve divine intuition by divine grace, which is invoked by acts of daily worship and meditation, devotional meditation, like chanting Hare Krishna, for example. So this is very significant, that the process of bhakti yoga is purifying the intuition. And when this intuition becomes completely pure, we all know what intuition is. So now imagine the intuition when it's completely pure. It's with that function of the mind that one comes into direct perception of Krishna. Divya pratyaksha means divine perception. So this means it is ultimately the awakening of spiritual senses of the soul. Right now, pratyaksha means these material senses. Divya pratyaksha means divine perception. And even now, this intuition that we have now, which is, again, not always so reliable, but still it is the seed of that divine perception. It is already there. Everyone knows what intuition is. So it simply needs to be purified, and this is done by the process of bhakti. So, wonder where. Oh yes, that'll come later. So we'll just go on now. Having talked about the cognitive side of the mind, thinking side of the mind, we'll jump over to the willing side. And we'll leave the affective or feeling side for the end, because that's most important. So the willing side of the mind, Ramanuja teaches, is of course based on our minute free will. Free will is an attribute of the Supreme Lord. Krishna has a name, Satya Sankalpa. This is expressing his absolute free will. Sankalpa means decision of the mind, what one chooses to do. And Satya means reality. So whatever the Lord chooses, that is absolute reality. What Krishna decides, it is. And it is for everyone, everything, all time. You see. Now our problem is we are imitating Krishna. With our tiny little brains and our tiny little meager resources, we're also thinking, yes, what I say, you know, like this, there's this English expression, my way or the highway. You do what I say or hit the road. We don't have the resources to back that up. So this is the indicative of all the false ego games that people play in this material world, trying to lord it over one another. And the whole thing is very frustrating. So Ramanuja teaches that the proper use of our free will is to enact it in agreement with the Lord's will. So actions in accordance with the Lord's will are liberating. And actions in defiance of the Lord's will are subject to judgment under the laws of karma. So then, above these two is the affective or feeling, emotional side of the mind. So Ramanujacharya teaches that all the truly healthy emotions, the positive emotions, they all culminate in love. So Bhakti Yoga redirects the jiva's love from material things to the Supreme Lord. In this way, the jiva attains the highest happiness. So Bhakti has something to offer all three functions of the mind. Let's now learn what these, the ways that Bhakti engages these features of the mind. So for the feeling side of the mind, Bhakti instills a longing for the Supreme Lord, for Krishna and for nothing else. This is expressed to the utmost degree in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshashtakam verse. This longing for the Lord is called Viraha Bhakti. Viraha means in separation. So, Yugayatam Nimeshena Chakrusha Pravashayatam Shunyayatam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me. Oh my Lord, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be 12 years or more. My eyes are flooding with the torrent of tears and I'm feeling all vacant in this world. So, Govinda Virahena, feeling your separation. So this is longing for the Lord, and this is the ultimate state of emotions. And this is cultivated in Bhakti Yoga. So another thing, in pursuance of this ideal emotional state, also are cultivated kalyana, which means a well-wishing attitude towards other living entities. Daya means compassion for others. Ahimsa means non-violence. And anavasada means joyfulness. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Maharaj was saying this morning in his class how our prime tapasya that we perform is preaching. So this preaching is the expression of compassion and mercy, and also ahimsa. Srila Prabhupada explains in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that One who doesn't preach, one who doesn't assist other living entities but giving them knowledge is actually doing violence to them. If one knows the right path of life but does not teach it to others who he's associating with, then he's actually in a, we can say, in a, I don't know what is the right word. Anyway, he's doing violence, not aggressively, but passively. So yes, a passive kind of violence. It's like seeing a child playing in the road, and you don't do anything about it. So, if the child is hit by a car and killed, and they find out investigating that you were there and you saw the whole thing, and you didn't do anything, you could have called to the child or gone out the road and brought the child in, then you would be in trouble. So it's the same thing. Now on the cognitive side, the thinking side of the mind, what does Bhakti Yoga bring? It brings viveka, means right discrimination. What is the right path as opposed to the wrong path? Arjava, integrity or honesty. To the cognitive, willing side, it brings right action, kriya. Like Gopal Bhatta Goswami has written the, what is that? Sat Kriya Sadadipika, this Shastra, which gives all of the kriyas, all of the regulated activities that Vaishnavas should perform in their life. There is
Gopal Bhatta Goswami on kirjoittanut kirjan Satkirja Dipika.
Oh yes, spiritual practice, abhyasa. Abhyasa yogena, Krishna says in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Rising early, chanting 16 rounds a day, are regular spiritual activities. Kriya refers to other activities like marriage and family life and things like this. These are counted as the kriyas, and the sacrifices and so on that are connected with them. Abhyasa refers specifically to the spiritual activities. Then also dana. Dana means welfare work. Again, work for the benefit of all living entities. Then to all three sides of the mind, thinking, feeling, willing, Ramanujacharya says Bhakti Yoga brings prapatti, complete surrender to the Lord. So one's thinking should be surrendered to Krishna, one's feeling, emotions surrendered to Krishna, and one's activities surrendered to Krishna. So, now, having established that, that's the simple presentation of the system of psychology within Bhakti Yoga. Now I want to go into a few deeper issues. One is about consciousness. There are often questions about consciousness. So, consciousness cannot be separated from the living entity. Consciousness is the energy of the spirit soul. At the same time, consciousness is an attribute of the living entity, an active attribute. So therefore it is possible for our tiny consciousness to become influenced in its activities. I was just listening to a lecture today by Srila Prabhupada, and he was talking about the affinity of the jiva, the living entity, for association with the three modes of material nature. You see, because of our consciousness, the living entity is always transcendental, but the consciousness is the attribute of the living entity, and that can become involved with the modes of nature. That can become attracted to and entangled in the modes of nature. And then the living entity becomes degraded by his consciousness. Isn't this what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita? He speaks of the degradation of the living entity by the mind. So once the mind becomes involved in the three modes of material nature, then it is pulled down. The whole purpose of Maya is to pull us down, Srila Prabhupada said, to beat us, to give us a very severe lesson. So we can be elevated by our consciousness or degraded by our consciousness. Now this is another very significant difference between Vaishnava philosophy and Mayavadi philosophy, because the Mayavadis, when they're saying things like Aham Brahmasmi, we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prakashananda Saraswati, it is said there that among the Mayavadis of Varanasi there are only talks about Brahman and Chaitanya, not meaning Lord Chaitanya, but Chaitanya meaning consciousness. And this is significant because in Mayavadi philosophy, these two are acquainted. Brahman means consciousness. You see, because their idea of liberation does not entail personality at all, does not entail any individuality. So there's no place for individual soul. There's just consciousness. So consciousness is the absolute truth. This is a difference between Vaishnava philosophy and Mayavadi philosophy. A very, very important difference. Yes, we say there's consciousness, but that's an attribute of the individual. The Mayavadis say, you are consciousness, that's all. So, therefore the Mayavadis cannot explain Maya. They cannot explain why we are here in the material world, in these material bodies. They can't explain it. So for them, Maya actually, again we come to this point, you can't, this is one of the items in both Buddhist philosophy and Mayavadi philosophy. They have a particular term. The Buddhists, Abhachaniya, they use this term, Abhachaniya. And the Mayavadis have a similar term, Anirvachaniya. And anyway, there's some term, it simply means don't talk about it. In Buddhist philosophy, which is the background of the Shankara impersonal philosophy, there are 10 points which it is said Buddha would not speak on. And one of these points is about the existence of the world. Does the world exist or does it not exist? And Buddha would never answer questions like this. And when you look at these 10 points, and you see there's no answer in Buddhism for these 10 points, you realize that Buddhism is not a philosophy at all. It doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain whether there's a soul or not, whether there's a universe or not, whether there is liberation for the soul or not. The whole point of Buddhism is to, as Prabhupada said, not that it's bad, but the whole point is just follow the regulative principles. Follow 4 regulative principles. But beyond that, it doesn't have much to say. And Mayavadis also, the impersonalists, they also don't know how to talk about this world, so they just say it's Maya, never mind. Just put it to the side and you have to realize it's still Brahman. So Vaishnava philosophy is this way, cogent. It has answers for these questions. So now, what else do we want to talk about? Let's talk about dreams. Well, let's talk about these 3 states of consciousness. Jagrata, waking state. So the consciousness of the jiva is granted by the material nature, meaning the mode of goodness. Room of movement on the physical plane. This is Jagrata, the waking state, where our consciousness is in touch with material objects, this body to begin with, and we can manipulate them to a certain degree. So consciousness is flowing along a subtle channel from the mind through the senses to the sense objects. In Svapna, or dream state, which is Rajoguna, then the link to the sense objects is closed. The consciousness flows only as far as the mind. And so when we dream, what are we engaging with? We're seeing images in our dream, and we're taking them even for real. So what is that? That is smriti. That is remembrance.
Muisti.
I told you that cognition, the thinking phase of the mind, is anubhava, observation, and smriti, remembrance.
Havainnointi ja
So
muisti.
remembrance is stored observations.
Muisti tarkoittaa
They're stored on a spool, she'll probably explain. And
havaintoja.
this is the bija, the seeds of our desires deep in the subconscious. And when we dream at night, then the memory brings forth these stored images.
Muisti tuo
And
esille näitä.
generally our dreams are, as everyone knows, are quite
Tiedämme, unet ovat
chaotic, even nonsensical, because
joskus jopa
the mind is just, because it doesn't have the steady reference of external sense objects, so the mind is just playing around with these memories and combining them in different ways. Prabhupada gives the example of, you've seen gold, you've seen a mountain, so the mind in dream will combine the two, and you visualize the golden mountain.
voit nähdä unessa kultaisen vuoren.
Now sometimes dreams are revealing some higher truth.
Joku korkeamman totuuden.
Sometimes that is also occurring during dreams.
Sitäkin voi tapahtua.
But as Srila Prabhupada said, we should try to get confirmation if we have such
vahvistus.
kind of stunning dream that seems to tell us something
Jos näemme tällaisen unen, joka kertoo
special.
eri
One should seek confirmation about it, because this is still, this medium is not reliable
koska se ei ole niin
because of
tapa
the games the mind is
ei
playing
olekaan
during
luotettava.
dreaming sleep. And then susupti, the deep dreamless state.
Susupti.
So here's another difference between Mayavadi philosophy and Vaishnava philosophy.
Ero Mayavadi-filosofian ja Vaishnava-filosofian.
So Ramanujacharya, he explains susupti
Ramanujacharya selittää susuptia.
as simply the soul is not witness to anything at
Että
that
sielu ei
time.
todista mitään sillä lailla.
Because the mind, the memory, the senses, the sense object, everything is closed to the soul's perception
Sielun
during
havainto.
susupti. This is also the state which is known as coma too.
Tätä tilaa kutsutaan
People
myöskin koomaksi.
somehow shift into this susupti state and stay there for a long, long time. Sometimes even for years.
Pitkän aikaa.
So this is
Joskus jopa
called
vuosi.
coma.
Sitä kutsutaan koomaksi.
So Shankaracharya,
Shankaracharya,
interestingly, he argues that this susupti state is the beginning of liberation.
on vapautuksen alku.
Again, this is because the Mayavadis, their philosophy says that perception is
Mayavadin
illusion.
filosofia
Name,
väittää,
form, quality,
havainto
activity
on
is
harha.
illusion. So the susupti state,
Nimimuoto ja toiminta on
deep
harha.
dreamless
Susupti.
sleep, there are no such perceptions or even memories of
Sillä ei ole
perception.
mitään havaintoja.
So Shankaracharya is glorifying susupti as the threshold of liberation.
Shankaracharya ylistää susuptia vapautuksen kynnykseksi.
And it's interesting that the Lord of this state of consciousness is Lord Shiva. And Shankaracharya is, who is Shankaracharya?
Herra on
He
Herra
is
Shiva.
Lord Shiva, the avatar of Lord
Ja
Shiva.
Shankaracharya on
So
Herra
he
Shivan
points to this
avatar.
as being
Miten hän
the beginning of the goal of liberation.
että se on
And this is
vapautuksen
completely
määränpää
refuted by
alku.
the Vaishnavacharyas.
Vaishnava-acharyat
Susupti means tamoguna, the deepest primordial tamoguna.
syvintä alkuperäistä tamagunaa.
So that's why Srila Prabhupada always said that these Mayavadis are ignorance. The goal of their whole process is the mode of ignorance.
Heidän menetelmänsä päämäärä on tietämättömyyden laatu.
So what else? Oh yes, now we want to talk about this Vasudeva Sattva state.
Sitten haluan puhua myös Vasudeva Sattva-tilasta.
So these three states,
Nämä kolme tilaa,
Jagarana, waking, Svapna, sleeping, with dreams, and Sushupti, dreamless sleep.
valveilla olo,
These are
uuten näkeminen ja
produced by the three modes of nature, which
syntyvät
explain
luonnon
goodness,
kolmesta
passion,
laadusta.
ignorance.
Kuten on
And
selitetty,
then as we've said before, above this is the Turiya, which means the fourth state, the transcendental state,
neljäs
Vasudeva Sattva.
yliastinen taso, Vasudeva Sattva.
So this is when the living entity rises
Tämä taso
above
on se, kun elävä olento
the
on noussut
sense of embodiment, either in
ruumiillisen
gross physical body or subtle mental body.
joko karkea tai hienoja.
And it's here that he begins to experience
Ja
Anandamaya,
tässä vähän aikaa kokea Anandamaya.
bliss of liberation.
Se on vapautus.
So Ramanujacharya says there are two levels of consciousness.
On kaksi tietoisuuden tasoa,
beyond the causal state of embodiment.
jotka ovat tämän ruumiillisen
This
tilan.
karana deha, which I explained before, that's the root of the mind.
Joka
From
on
this comes the
mielen.
subtle body and the gross body. So beyond that, there is what Ramanuja calls yogic pratyaksha. This is the perceptions of the advanced mystic yogis.
Joka on edistyneiden
But this is not yet
havainto.
Vasudeva Sattva.
Mutta se ei ole
This is
vielä
a kind of
Vasudeva
borderline.
vaan se on siinä
So the
rajalla.
real Vasudeva Sattva,
Todellinen Vasudeva
he
Sattva.
calls
Hän kutsuu
Nirupadika Gyan.
Nirupadika
Knowledge
Gyan.
which is beyond upadi, which is beyond the designation of body or mind.
Tämän ruumiin ja mielen
So, this is
määritelmien yläpuolella.
called by Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada
Srila Prabhupada calls this Kshetra Gya.
Kshetra
I've already quoted, well, I don't know if I mentioned it in this verse, but there's a quotation by Srila Prabhupada. It's from Canto 4, chapter 29, verse 69, purport. And he explains some very interesting things about this Vasudeva Sattva state. This is this Kshetra Gya state. This is when the living entity has a clear vision of the 24 ingredients of creation. He's looking at the Lord's creative energies from a position above, transcendental to them. And Srila Prabhupada in that purport, he says, this is just like what Mother Yashoda saw when she looked into Lord Krishna's mouth. She saw the whole creation together, just within the Lord's mouth. So this is Vasudeva Sattva. And this is the, as I told you, this is when the living entity is on his way back home, back to Godhead, having transcended this world. It's like material mode of goodness you can compare to the airport. You go to the airport, you should go to the airport only for one reason, to board your plane. Maybe some people go to the airport to use the shops there. And they go home, I don't know. There's big airports, they have lots of shops. But really one should go to the airport. The airport is here, meaning here in this, on this realm, but it's where you board the plane. Then when the plane is taking off, you see, and you're over Finland, over Helsinki, and you're looking through your window down. So this is like Vasudeva Sattva. You're actually above it all. You see it still, but you're above it. And then when the plane lands at its destination, Goloka Vrindavan, that is Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. That is entering into the intimate personal rasa with Krishna. So, yes, we have time, so we can finish this. I wanted to speak of a couple more things that are important. Vasana and samskara. Vasana, samskara, and we can add also the term bija, which means seed, and they're all very closely related. So, vasana in Sanskrit, you look in the Muni Williams Sanskrit dictionary, the word vasana, one of the meanings is pouring into. So, our desires pour into the mind from the subconscious. Prabhupada uses this term, subconscious. So, as I explained already, within the subconscious there is bija, seeds of desire. And why do they awaken? Why do they pour into the mind? Because the word vasana means the waves of desire. And we find this word vasana used, Srila Prabhupada used it, he explained it in a lecture. And it's also in several verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, fifth canto. So, desire pours into the mind and goes through these phases of thinking, feeling, and willing. And this is how the living entity's karma continues on and on and on, because he's subject to these desires. It's like, you know, like a faucet on your bathroom sink. And the faucet's turned on, so the water's pouring into the sink and filling up, and then overflowing. If you don't turn it off, you know, your whole house will be flooded. Now this is actually what's
alas vaan
happening
tulvii yli
in our mind.
Pesualas
The
tulvii.
desires are,
Ne
they
tapahtuu
keep
mielessä.
pouring into
Siitä
the
tulee jatkuvasti
mind
toiveita
from the subconscious.
alitajunnasta.
And we're forced to act on them.
Meidän on pakko toimia niiden mukaisesti.
So, why is that happening?
Miksi näin tapahtuu?
So, this is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. As long as the mind is, the term is guna pravaha, as long as the mind is agitated by the three modes of material
Kolme
nature,
luonnonlaatua agitoidut mieltä.
and it means the mind is constantly in a state of agitation.
Se on jatkuvasti tässä kiihtyneessä tilassa.
So, in spiritual life, we can see this. We can see some days, we often get these kind of questions.
On tämmöisiä kysymyksiä.
Some days we feel very inclined to Krishna consciousness, very enthusiastic. We seem to be getting a nice taste from the things that we do. And then gradually there's a change in the consciousness. We start to become impatient, we start to become bored. We want some excitement. We feel this agitation building up more and more. So this is material mode of goodness changing into mode of passion. And then if the mode of passion is allowed to get stronger and stronger and stronger, then one has to release this passion through some type of sense gratification. And having done that, then one is dropped into the mode of ignorance. One feels very miserable and unhappy. And then, as these modes change, so then after some time in the mode of ignorance, completely disgusted, frustrated, then one thinks, wow, now I'm going to be, one gets his resolve together, now I'm going to really be a steady devotee, and let you come back up to the mode of goodness again. But again, see, and in this way we can notice how the mind goes round and round. So this is guna pravaha. This is the constant agitation of the mind by the modes of nature. And so as long as the mind is in that state, the desires will continue to enter. So, therefore, the mind's conditioning has to be cut. This state in which the mind is agitated, we have to cut through that. In this verse in the 5th canto, which we find the word vasana. Also, we find this term shodashika atma, which means that the soul, the atman, is conditioned by 16 material elements. And these 16 are 5 gross senses, 5 active senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 sense objects, and the mind. And also these 15, the 10 kinds of senses, 5 sense objects, they're serving the mind. So the mind out of these 16 is the master, the most formidable of these elements. So these 16 coverings of our consciousness, this is the state of agitation. So we need a means to cut through these coverings, and that is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. In the Kali Santra Upanishad, Iti Shodasha Kalashit Yivasya Varinam Vinashanam Tatap Krashti Parabrahma Mega Pai Ravi Rasmi Mandalivati. That the 16 names of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, you can add them up. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, 16. So there are 16 names in the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and they attack and destroy. Vinasa means to destroy. There's 16 coverings. And then Tatapa Krashati Parabrahma. In this way you can see the Param Brahma, Shri Krishna, Mega Pai Ravi Rasmi Mandaliti. In the same way as when the clouds are cleared in the sky, we see the sun. You don't need any help to see the sun on a cloudless day. So in the same way, clouds of our material consciousness are dissipated by pure chanting. Then we can see Krishna. And then Then this means the state of pure mind, spiritual
Tämä
mind.
tarkoittaa puhdasta
There's
henkistä.
this nice analogy also given in the 5th canto to
Viidennessä laulussa
explain
on annettu myös
the mind.
vertauskuva.
The material mind vis-a-vis the spiritual mind. And this is an example with the ghee lamp,
Esimerkki Giilampu,
which we offer every day to the
jonka
deity in
uhramme
the arti.
alttarilla.
So if the ghee lamp is made of poor quality materials,
Giilampu on tehty
not nice ghee, dirty ghee, or
likasta giitä.
the cotton is not first class.
Tässä se
And then the ghee
pumpuli ei ole ensi
will not burn nice,
Silloin se
it will
ghee ei pala
sputter,
hyvin.
not give
Se vapisee se vie.
much light, and create
Siitä
smoke,
tulee paljon savua.
and make everything black.
Se tulee savua ja
You see, so this is the
kaikki
vritti.
muuttuu
This
mustaksi.
is called monosovritti. Prabhupada uses this term quite a bit. Monosovritti. This means the material engagements of the mind, the material functions of the mind.
Toiminta.
Hmm? And so, how is the mind engaged? Materially. The mind is engaged in the senses,
Se on omistautunut.
and the mind is engaged in itself.
Mieli on omistautunut itselleen.
So, even when we are not, you see, like in devotional service, Krishna consciousness living in the temple,
Jos
the
eletään
whole
temppelissä,
aim of living in the temple is
syö
to purify our perceptions.
on
We're
puhdista
perceiving the deity, we're perceiving devotees, we're taking Krishna prasadam, we're hearing only Krishna kirtan. So this way, all of our senses are engaged with pure objects. But the mind itself, you see, can still engage in nonsense. You see, the mind doesn't need to see, hear, smell, feel illicit sense objects to become agitated, to become lusty. It has its own storehouse of memories. It can pull out a memory from the storehouse and focus on that and expand all kinds of desires, you see, on the basis of just a memory, which is just a mental image. The mind doesn't actually need a physical flesh and blood sense object. It can do the same thing, just with its own images. So this is, again, why is the mind is said to be most formidable, much more formidable than the senses. So when the mind is engaged in itself, this is speculation. This is called kalpana. Yes, I wanted to explain kalpana. Kalpana means imagination. It's another function of the mind. So imagination. When the mind is absorbed in itself, and this, again, this is the Mayavadi process. Prabhupada says that the Mayavadi process is kalpana, imagination, which is symptomatic again of the mode of ignorance. They imagine that you can worship any form of God. They imagine that I am God, you are God. Their whole process is imagine. They imagine the state of oneness with God. Whole process is imagination. So these functions, these vasana and kalpana, and bija means the root desires, the seed desires in the heart. And some, samskara. Samskara means impressions. Every experience we have, or ever have had in any life, in any form of life, any species of life we have had, this makes an impression on the mind. And these impressions are stored again. And they're held within the bija, the seeds of desire. So the mind brings them out by the process of imagination. So this is why the mind is so troublesome. So to counteract this, one has to take, especially, of course there's a whole process of devotional service, it's a whole package, but everything that's there, like we have 9 processes of devotional service, but 3 of them are considered essential. Hearing, chanting, and remembering. And the other 6 are sort of supports of these 3. So the deity worship or whatever else we may be doing throughout the 24 hours a day in devotional service. They are meant to give support and strength to the chanting. So it is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the chanting, the hearing, and then the remembering. What does remembering mean? That means the mind is always occupied with Krishna. In the Sri Brahma Samhita, this Ononnichin Marasa Madhyam Natsu Praninam Pratipalam Smaratamopetya. So Manaksu, when the mind becomes pure, and this is the tattva state. I explained the vritti state of the mind, this poorly burning lamp, giving little light and a lot of smoke. But when the ghee lamp burning nicely, very bright, this is called the tattva state. The real state, or the true mind, the spiritual mind, the original mind. So in Brahma Samhita this is called Manaksu. Su means very nice mind, pure mind. Then with this mind, Manaksu, Pranitam Pratipalam Smaratamopetya. One can always remember Vilayatina, the Leela of the Lord. Bhumanana Jayata Visham. In this way, one conquers, one crosses over this material world. Being always absorbed in the mind in Krishna consciousness. So, therefore, this is the essential process, chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And this is getting back to what we've heard about these three phases of the mind. The chanting of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, as we can see in the Shikshashtakam prayers, Lord Chaitanya's explanation of the chanting, is bringing forth the pure emotions. And we are led by our emotions. So the whole point of bhakti is to purify the emotions, so that our emotions will lead us back home, back to God. This is the state of bhakti called raga bhakti. Raga means attraction to Krishna, spontaneous attraction. So we begin at vaidhi, or sadhana, practice. But this practice is to lead to the awakening of purified emotions. And these emotions will drag us to Krishna. Once they're awakened. Like Narada Muni, he's explaining to Vyasadeva, he's awakening in Krishna consciousness. He described how all his senses became separately enlivened, as if they had a life of their own, and they all in their own way, they pulled his consciousness to Krishna. His senses were just diving. His eyes, his ears, every sense was diving into the form of the Lord. And so that pulls the consciousness. Alright, it's 7:30. I believe I've said enough. Are there any questions? Yes?
Guru Maharaj, I don't understand what the purpose of dreams or the swapna state actually is. The Jagrata state, that of course gives us a platform of action, also Krishna conscious action. And you explained yesterday that the Suhotra state, it rejuvenates the mind.
Yeah.
What is the real purpose of dreams?
Okay, there's an answer to that when you say the real purpose. The real purpose is, as Prabhupada explains in, again, purport of Canto 4, Chapter 29, verse 69. Dreams are there for the devotee to live out any residual karma that he may have, that for an ordinary person would cause that individual to take birth again. So the devotee lives out these stored up karmas through dream, and they're burned up, and so he doesn't have to take birth again. And this again is experienced on this Vasudeva Sattva platform. So that's the real purpose of dreams. Otherwise, for those who are just in Maya, dreams are just another feature of Maya. Prabhupada used to say, this life is a daydream and a night dream. Dreaming in the day and dreaming at night. Yes.
Said like we can have all our senses engaged in proper activities, but the mind can be busy with something else. How does the bhakti process work to correct
Yes. Well, again, this is
bhakti korjaa sen.
like Srila Prabhupada, he once said that you may be
Sillä Prabhupada
sitting in
sanoi,
the temple
voit istua temppelissä
among the devotees,
bhaktojen keskellä.
but if your mind
Mutta jos
is
mielessä
somewhere
on
else,
jossain
then you're
muualla,
not actually there.
niin et ole siellä todellisuudessa.
So the bhakti process corrects this.
Bhakti-menetelmä
When we
korjaa.
apply our mind to the bhakti process, and that
mielen
particularly means the hearing and
bhakti-menetelmään.
chanting.
Erityisesti kuulemisen.
So one has to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, endeavoring to avoid the offenses. And in the
Hare Krishna Mahamantraa täytyy laulaa.
Harinam Chintamani,
Yrittäen välttää
we find that
loukkauksia.
this offense, pramada or inattentiveness, is
Tämä
said to
loukkaus,
be
pramada,
the cause of the.
tarkkaamattomuus.
Actually, there's a list of 10 offenses, and then we say there's also inattention is also considered. But that inattention, pramada, is actually said to be the cause of the other 10 offenses.
Näille muille loukkauksille.
So this is abhyasa, this is practice that we have to do.
Meidän pitää harjoitella.
To chant very seriously and carefully and hear every syllable of the Maha Mantra, avoiding these offenses. And then that will cut through the layers of the mind, conditioned layers of the mind. If we don't do this, then Srila Prabhupada said you can chant Hare Krishna and take birth again and again and again. Millions of lifetimes. Chanting on this sort of, mental platform. Never overcoming the mind. So that is really a question of application of the process.
Kysymys on prosessin seuraamisesta.
This is the point of the free will of the living entity.
Tässä tulee kysymykseen elävän
You see,
olevan
Srila Prabhupada said,
Srila Prabhupada sanoi,
each one of us, we're piloting our own plane.
että me kaikki lennämme omaa
He gave this
konetta.
analogy.
Hän on
You're in your own airplane flying.
olet omassa
So other devotees,
lennossa.
they're flying next to you, very nice.
Vastat voivat
You can
lentää
talk on the
vieressä.
radio.
Kaiken hyvin ne voivat puhua heidän radion välityksellä.
But if you lose control of your plane,
Mutta jos et
who's going to
kannan
correct?
omaa
You
konetta,
can get advice over the radio, but
joku voi antaa
it's not possible for another person, another devotee, to step into your
Mutta ei ole
space,
mahdollista
you
toinen
know,
vakto.
and take over your controls and do it for you.
Ottaisi
It's
sinun
not
ohjaamasi.
possible. Even the spiritual master doesn't do that.
Edes henkinen opettaja ei niissä.
Ultimately, the living entity has his free will.
Pohjimmiltaan elävällä olennolla
And we have to exercise, this is what we heard. We have to exercise our free will in agreement with Krishna's will.
Vapaata tahtoa on
And that's up to us.
harjoitettava yhteydessä Krishnan tahtoon.
So,
Se on meidän tehtävä.
this is the test.
Tämä on koe.
Yes?
In Guru Maharaj, in connection with this thinking, feeling and living, engaging into Krishna service came to my mind. You have a couple times mentioned this point about Swabhava Bhakti and Svarupa Siddhi Bhakti, and how we should come to this higher platform of Bhakti. So can we say that this willing, or if we are in this Swabhava Bhakti, that we are willing still like what in like a selfish way, not what Krishna wants?
No, not necessarily. Svabhava means your nature.
Svabhava tarkoittaa
So,
omaa luonnettasi.
There, you see, every devotee has,
Jokaisella vaktalla
we can say, sort of like two identities.
on
There's
kaksi identiteettiä.
like there's a prayer to the spiritual master.
Tässä on rukous henkisellä
Pratan Svanavadipe Dvinecham Dvi Vujam Gurun Varabhayam Pranchantam Swanetam Nama Purvikam. Something like that. Yes, Pratan Shimanavadipe Dvinecham. Yes, so one is meditating on the spiritual master
Edesvedän henkistä opettajaa
in Navadvip
Navadvipassa.
in his form as
Hänen muodossaan.
a participant of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan
Hänet
movement.
Chaitanyan Sankirtan liikkeen.
Two eyes, Dvinecham Vibhujam, two
Hänellä on
arms.
kaksi silmää ja kaksi kättä.
So this means human-like form. So this is
Ihmisen kaltainen
the
muoto.
sadhaka roop
Se on
of
sadhaka,
the spiritual master.
henkisen opettajan sadhaka.
Sadhaka,
Sadhaka.
this is performing your duties. I was explaining vyavahar, or conventional duties. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that dharma, or real religious life, is established by the vyavahar, so to speak, worldly activities or visible activities of a sadhu, of a devotee.
mitä sadhu bhakta
This is
tekee.
the meaning of acharya. What acharya does in this world,
Acharya.
that we should follow.
Kun acharya ilmestyy tässä maailmassa, hän
And
tulee
this is
seuraamaan.
also according to svabha, according to
Sekin
nature.
johtuu svabhavasta, luonteesta.
Everyone has their nature, we have to engage
Jokaisella on
that
oma
nature in
luonteensa, ja tuo
Krishna's
luonne on
service.
omistettava Krishnan palveluun.
So, but that's external.
Mutta se on ulkoista.
You engage your body according to the duty that's suitable for you.
Keho omistetaan
And then
niihin
internally,
velvollisuuksiin, jotka sopivat
this
meille.
Swarupa Siddhi Bhakti,
Sisäisesti on
this is
Swarupa
the
Siddhi Bhakti.
internal cultivation of hearing and chanting, remembering
Sisäinen
Krishna.
kuulemisen ja laulamisen ja muistamisen.
So the Svabhava Bhakti is there to keep the body properly engaged, so, body and mind, so that it won't create unnecessary difficulty for us. Of course,
Svabhava Bhaktin tarkoituksena on
one
omistaa
is-
ruumissa mieli.
becomes
Se ruumissa ei
attached
aiheuta meille
to
vaikeuksia.
one's external duties
Mutta jos kiinnyminen
at the
ulkoiseen
sacrifice of
uhraamalla,
the internal cultivation of Krishna
Kun
consciousness, and that can be a danger. I can remember
se voi
when
olla vaaratilanne.
Srila Prabhupada
Muistan,
was,
kun Srila Prabhupada
he was speaking, I'm not going to mention the name, but he was speaking to one of my senior god brothers.
vanhemmalle jumalveljelle.
That time was one of the trustees, I think. I don't know if that time they already had trustees, but it was the book trust, book publication.
Kirjeen
And
julkaisu
he was
luottohenkilö.
he had high responsibilities
Oli
in
paljon
that.
velvollisuuksia.
And he was showing Srila Prabhupada
Hän näytti Srila
their,
Prabhupada.
they had reprinted the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a nice hardbound edition.
Kovakantisena
And
versioina.
Srila Prabhupada was looking at it,
Srila Prabhupada katseli sitä.
and then he looked at this devotee who was showing it to
Sitten hän
him,
katsoi tätä bhaktaa, joka näytti
kind of
sitä.
sarcastically said,
Sanoi hieman sarkastisesti.
"But you never read this book, do you?"
Mutta sä et koskaan lue tätä kirjaa vai mitä?
In other words, he's printing them, and like Maharaj was saying this morning also.
Niin kuin Maharaj sanoi tänä aamulla.
Were you? No, I knew you. I was looking at Bhaji Narayan. Yes, he was remembering Prabhupada. Prabhupada also said, my books are not for, on this occasion, Bhaji Narayan was remembering. My books are not simply for selling. Another time he said, this is not an export business.
Tämä ei ole
We
vientibisnes.
don't have books just for exporting.
Meille
We have
kirja
them for
vain
reading.
vientiä varten.
So it is possible, and we've seen the tragic results
Kuten
of
olemme
this
nähneet traagisia tuloksia
movement. It is possible
liikehistoriassa. Mutta on mahdollista,
just to
että joku vain
go only as far as the external
tekee vain
engagement
ulkoisia
and
harjoituksia, ulkoisia
not
toimia,
push himself
eikä työnnä itseään.
in the internal purification, which again means the cultivation of hearing and chanting.
Joka tarkoittaa kuulemisen ja laulamisen.
And Prabhupada used to stress this. Trivikram Maharaj remembers
Prabhupada painotti tätä.
when Srila Prabhupada asked him, "Are you hearing your rounds?" And he was very, very serious.
Prabhupada kysyi Trivikrama Maharajilta,
Not just chanting, but are you hearing them?
et pelkästään santaa, mutta
You
kuulemisen.
must hear.
Meidän pitää kuulla kierroksen.
So there are these two sides.
On nämä kaksi
Yes,
puolta.
one.
Yeah, these memories from many lifetimes,
On muistoja
do
monilta.
they ever go away, or
Menevätkö ne koskaan
you
pois?
just have to learn to ignore them,
Vai
or
täytyykö oppia vaan
to get,
laiminlyömään?
Well, since all of our desires and consequently our memories,
Kaikki
Because
toiveet ja muistot.
the memories of what we do, they get re-fed back into
Ja muistot,
this
että ne
level of
menee takaisin tonne
seeds of desires. It's
toiveiden
like a cycle.
siementen tasolle. Se on
This
niin
is
kierros.
explained in the Nectar devotion also.
Antamuksen
It's like
nektarissa.
the recycling of desires. You act on them and then they become impressions and they go back down into the
painaumia.
cellar
Ne menevät taas
of
kellariin.
stored desires and they keep going round and
Ja
round
ne
and round.
kiertävät kiertämistään.
So these desires, these impressions, these memories,
Nämä toiveet,
ultimately what are they? They're perverted reflections
ne ovat vääristyneitä
of our spiritual consciousness, our spiritual activities, our spiritual remembrance of
henkisestä
our place in
muistelusta.
Krishna's pastimes.
Paikastamme Krishnan leikeissä.
So the perverted memories will just give way
Vääristyneet
to the transcendental memories.
muistot väistyvät
There's a point
ylijärjestelmisten muistojen työllä.
where, like for example, lust,
Esimerkiksi himo,
which is a perversion of love,
joka on rakkauden vääristö.
So the lust disappears
Himo katoaa,
and love manifests in that place.
rakkaus ilmenee siellä.
So Srila Prabhupada said like this.
Sillä Prabhupada sanoo,
When someone wrote to him about that he was very troubled by lusty desires,
joku oli
Srila Prabhupada said, go to Krishna.
Prabhupada
and pray to
sanoi,
him.
Krishnan luo ja rukoile häntä.
Krishna is the most expert in lusty desire.
Krishna on
That's what Prabhupada said. So there's a point where the one thing is just giving way to the other.
on tilanne,
The mundane is
missä
just
vain
giving way to the transcendental.
yksi asia antaa tietä toiselle. Maallinen antaa tietä yliaisteelliselle.
That happens only at the point of purification.
Mutta näin tapahtuu vain puhdistumisen tapa.
Yes.
According to astrology, I think that they mentioned that some things, some aspects like like moon, they are affecting to the mind and making like more easily like mental like that. So if we are practicing bhakti yoga in the stage, we are not completely fixed, but chanting and following things like that. Is there any consideration? These things, is there like some what will happen to that aspect?
Vaikutusta tai kuvasta siitä,
Take that because
miten nämä asiat vaikuttaa.
Yeah, all these things, they have their application on the. Again, we have to. There's Vyavahar platform and Paramartha platform. So Paramartha platform means the soul's engagement in Krishna consciousness. Vyavahar is body and mind. So that also has to be engaged in devotional service. But there is the question of our residual karma, our conditioning, also these astrological influences. So particularly in these vyavahar kriyas, these activities, like for example marriage, so astrology is helpful in that, matching up a proper partner, because if that match is not nice, then to accomplish one's duties in Grihastha ashram can be very, very difficult. But ultimately all these vyavahar kriyas, all these vyavahar duties are there so that we can have a basis to perform a steady basis to perform our spiritual activities, abhyasa yoga, our spiritual practices, and by that we become stronger and stronger, and we become more detached from the material basis. So like Kavichandra Maharaj, I remember he was married. I don't know how it turned out, but anyway, he became a sannyasi. So this vyavahar marriage, that only goes so far. And then at some point in life, we have to rise above it, because it's not going to last, that relationship. It's temporary anyway. So before, Shakdoni had Yapsholam Praksharira the Mokshana, Krishna says, before the time of giving up the body, before the last breath, Kama Krodha Bhavam Degam, and we have to rise above Kam, lust, Krodha, frustration, Bhavam Degam, these pushings, 6 minded pushings. We have to rise above their influence. Krishna is giving us, he's like saying, alright, you have this, the life of this body, but before you leave it, you have to transcend it. These pushings. So the vyavahara is just to, get oneself steady. One should accept the position that one feels most comfortable in and act in that way as a duty, and at the same time prosecuting the spiritual practice and gaining spiritual strength from that, so that they can eventually rise above the need to depend on material nature. Okay, anything else? Yes?
Maharaj, you mentioned that the cognitive side of the mind, including anubhava and smriti, is kalpana also part of that side, or which?
Kalpana, imagination. Yeah, that would be connected with the Tarka, which is a subdivision of Anubhava. Tarka means logic. Anuman. Kalpana. Imagination. His part is Anuman. Mental functions. Okay? Thank you very much. Seminar is over.